than 9/11, not to diminish it in any way. This would be 10 or 11 times 9/11 for Israel based on the number of people that were lost. So this is a big event. It's a big event. And it's a big event for the world. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I want to bring up that first slide, if you would, of the puppeteer, if you guys don't mind. So this is the image I want you to have. I'm going to first do a little bit of description about what's going on, if you think of a puppet show, what's going on the stage with the puppets, always with an understanding that there is a puppeteer that is moving above. And our task, we don't walk according to what we can see. And in this metaphor, just the puppet activity. We walk according to what we cannot see. And there are spiritual forces that are engaged in the Middle East. And if we don't understand those, we're going to be reactionary. You see it all over secular media. People, you've got Palestinian marches here in the United States, you've got pro-Israel marches, and people get very inflamed, and it goes nowhere other than inciting more violence. As followers of Jesus, let me be clear about this. As followers of Jesus, we are for Israelis. As followers of Jesus, we're also for Arabs. We are for their salvation. They are created in the image of God. They are beloved. And yet, there is a spiritual force of wickedness in heavenly places that is utilizing the bodies of many men and women in these terrorist organizations. And it was no different during the time of Jesus. In John chapter 8, Jesus was confronted, and he made a remarkably, what appears to be, had he not been Jewish, an anti-Semitic remark to some of, not all of, the religious elite, when they wanted to murder him, and he said, "You are of your father, the devil." In other words, he's saying, this is playing out down here, this murderous heart, but he realized you are of your father. Satan is pulling the strings in your heart. You are of your father, the devil, in the sense that you want to murder me. Okay. Now, he didn't just do that with the religious Jews, as I alluded to a minute ago in Luke chapter 9. He also did that with his own disciples when they wanted to call fire down from heaven. There is a new covenantal, massive change in the way that God deals with people, and he deals with people now through his Son. Okay. This is called, if you will, the church age, or under the new covenant. And under the new covenant, as a follower of Jesus, I am for everyone. But I'm not unaware of the puppeteering that's going on above me, and that my battle, as Paul said, is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. That hand up there, metaphorically, that's where all the action's taking place. It's being manifest on this puppet stage. So the first thing I want to do this morning is I would like to describe a little bit about what's going on. And many of you know these details, but some of you, it'll make more sense, I think, in the larger context. It makes more sense. We're going to describe what's going on on the stage. What is being moved now? Right now, Israel, again, became a nation. Why? I think there was a moment of sympathy at the end of World War II, having all the curtains pulled back and seeing 6 million Jews having been slaughtered by what? By a satanic force called the SS. Okay? And there was a moment of sympathy. The United Nations established it. And by the way, many lines of nations were redrawn post-World War II. So this is not like these lands have shifted and changed over time. But there was a moment of sympathy worldwide, not among all. There was a pan-Islamic movement immediately after that fully engaged and tried to destroy Israel the day after that was declared that they had become a nation. Many of those tanks are still there in the Golan Heights and other places, and God miraculously, in my view, based upon how I see, and I'll unpack this over the next 2 weeks, there's a purpose for the reestablishment of the nation of Israel that has not only to do with the Jewish people coming to know Jesus, but has everything to do with a worldwide, global, and I believe this with all of my heart, and I'm going to try to unpack this for you a little bit, a restoration of the world, but especially among the Middle East. They play a role, and that's part of why anti-Semitism, in my view, still exists. So right now, what are the characters on the stage? Well, I'll tell you what the characters are on the stage right now. You have multiplicity of terrorist organizations. Dr. Saref alluded to them as being radical Muslim ideology, a radical, terroristic. And what is terror? It's using horror to try to penetrate and drive fear into a nation or community. They operate through terror. And by the way, I'm going to show you in a few minutes just exactly how that happened in the Old Testament. It's always been the case. But right now, if you know, there's a little strip of land called Israel along the Mediterranean. And right now, I should have put up a map. And the lower left is where the Philistines actually used to be. It's a place we call the Gaza Strip. Somewhere up above mid-center is called the West Bank. You hear about it all the time. And then north of Israel is both Syria and Lebanon that border Israel on its northern border. Now, some of you will know the reason for the fleet, being the Sixth Fleet, being called in to the Mediterranean from the United States is not because the Gaza Strip needs more artillery. It is a protection device against Hezbollah, who's on the northern borders, who is different than Hamas or the PLO. On the northern border in Lebanon, the terrorist organization that has situated itself in Lebanon is called Hezbollah. Hezbollah wants the same thing that Hamas wants. They want Israel to not exist. They don't want peace. There is never going to be peace with these organizations. The West Bank is controlled by modern day what we call the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. It is more of a political entity than a terrorist organization. It has control over the West Bank, and that's in the middle. Now remember, the whole state of Israel is about the size of New Jersey. When you read that the nations will reel because of Jerusalem, and you read these things and you go, this is happening in our day. This should have been, if this was a farce, this should have long ago been a non-issue. This tiny strip of land that the whole world is riveted on is in many ways reflective of the reality of the legitimacy of the Bible itself, because the prophets had seen these kinds of days in the future. That's important for you to understand. Hamas is then, as you know, the terrorist organization that in 2005, Israel pulled out all of its people and ceded control of the Gaza Strip back to those Palestinians that were living there. 2 years later, they elected Hamas as for their governance. Okay, so since 2007, and since then, there have been rockets fired over and over that little fence that separates the southern part of Israel with the Gaza Strip, and that has continued. I need to preface some of these next statements with my opinion. I'm going to give you my opinion on this. Some of you are maybe Bible prophecy people, and I'm not. I try to understand the prophets as best I can, but my observation over the last number of decades has been that and reading back what's happened really since the establishment of the nation of Israel, there's been speculation about Antichrist and who and this and that, and everybody gets really confused, and some people even thought, Jesus is coming on this time because it said within a generation of the reestablishment of the nation of Israel and the fig tree blossoming again or something. Jesus said that generation will see the coming of Jesus, and so there were people. If you know anything about church history, you have had all kinds of Christians through the last 100 years or so that have gotten themselves, sold all their stuff, and set out in the field. The Millerites and many other people like that set out there ready for Jesus to come back because they had gone through their calculations based upon the view of the apocalyptic language that does exist in the Bible, and it oftentimes is very disillusioning. People walk away from the faith because they get disillusioned about people not making the right decision about what prophecies apply to what. I'm not going to do that. Yes, there's an Ezekiel war, and it could be that it's, some of these names are a little bit mystical. People get very adamant about this. Russia and Turkey and this and kind of come against Israel. And some of you may have read books like that, and that may be well the case. Some of these positions may, and that Ezekiel war may happen. But that to me is still not the primary issue of why Israel and why is there anti-Semitism. It doesn't answer the questions I want answered, because when I go, and I have spoken at some of these prophecy conferences, years ago, I spoke at some of these. And at the end, I was always asking the question, what did that accomplish? Now, I may be stepping on some toes, and I'm sorry if I am, but what did that accomplish? There's nothing wrong with wanting to know and reading the Bible and all those kinds of things and building your construction, whether you're premillennial or postmillennial or amillennial or whatever, and your view of how this is all going to come back down the pike. The problem is, what is that accomplishing? And sometimes I saw it accomplishing some very deleterious things, is that people would construct something and they would say, well, you don't need to worry about sharing the gospel in the Middle East because Jesus is going to come back and then they're going to believe. And that to me the Apostle Paul would stand up and shout, are you crazy? That's my view. Because he always went first into the synagogue. Jews are saved just like you and I are saved. Not because they're the apple of God's eye, because they accept that Jesus was the Messiah, the long-awaited Messiah, and they believe into him. The same way Arabs are and the same way any other Gentile is. We look at Jesus and we see him as the long-awaited Messiah. Please understand that foundationally. What's going on right now has been going on for a long time. In fact, we can go all the way back to Amalek, if you can imagine. And we have actually something on One for Israel on this. There's a little bit of dialogue. But there's what some people call the spirit of Amalek. The spirit of Amalek. One thing we know is that Satan himself in John 10:10 does what? The thief comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy. Do you understand the very nature of Satan himself? Yes. Killing, stealing, and destroying. I don't care what you are. If you stand up and you say, I'm religious and I'm supporting the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I am a Christian, and you have murder in your heart towards any people group, I'm not talking about government. I'm not talking about you being in the military. I'm talking about on an individual basis. If murder is in your heart, then Satan has you in his puppet strings. I'm telling you that right now, because that's what Jesus told, not only as I alluded to the religious Jews, it's exactly what he also told his own disciples. That's true. The Satan can use, if Israel goes in and they go in and their foot soldiers go in and they go and begin to dismember babies and cut and kill mothers in front of their children or children in front of their mothers, I'm going to tell you that is satanic. I do not support that. And you shouldn't either. As a follower of Jesus, the nature of Jesus is mercy and love and compassion. Now again, we'll look into this more next week, but governments have a responsibility. But as the kingdom of God, we don't have murder in our heart. I have compassion for those in the Gaza Strip who are not part of this Hamas. I have compassion for, Jews and Israelis within Israel. I have compassion for those who were slaughtered. I can have compassion for both. I don't have to draw a line in the sand and then because what that does is it puts me back out on the stage of the puppets, and it compromises my ability to share the gospel because it looks like I'm a politico that think there are other things that dominate my heart more than the salvation of all people. Do you understand that, church at the Red Door? Now, as I look at the things here, I see an ally in Israel on the geopolitical, so I'm also a citizen of the United States. I'm not unwise to this. I know that these terrorist organizations want to kill, that America's the great Satan and Israel is the lesser Satan. I understand. Read the charter. I'm not picking out what they say. Read Hamas's charter. They want Christians, they want U.S. citizens, and again, this is not all Muslims, but this is the terrorist organization Hamas. Read it for yourself. So as someone who exists both on this plane and understanding the spiritual realm. I am both a U.S. citizen and I may politically vote in the direction of Israel. Why? Because I think it's the best thing for our United States of America. That's a political statement. That is my personal political statement. But I operate on a much different plane than that, and the reason is because I know when the gospel comes in, that's going to be good for those in Lebanon and the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. If I love Palestinians, I want Palestinians. One of those precious brothers, those Arab brothers that was singing on that first song in front of the tomb, as an Arab brother, and what a voice, and what a gracious, wonderful, just loving, compassionate. I have no hatred in my heart at all for Arab-speaking people. Zero. And if it starts to rise because I am impacted by what I see on the puppet show stage, then I have to retreat and say, where is my head? I have to recalibrate. Satan loves to create anger and animosity among the people. And you can see Christian church history. One of the hardest things to do is to share Jesus with Jewish people because they know the history. And many parading as Christians in the Crusades and the Inquisitions and all that kind of stuff, they know the history. Or they grew up in a neighborhood here in the United States and they were called all kinds of names by Christian people. I'm just telling you, just because you hear somebody saying something under the name of Christianity, if it's not driven by mercy and love and compassion for everyone, it's not the Spirit of Jesus. Period. Period. And I hope you sense that spirit in our friends. 1 John 3, verse 7, little children, make sure no one deceives you. The one who practices righteousness is righteous. The one who practices sin is of the devil. Practices sin. I sin, but it's my intention not to practice sin. For the devil has sinned from the beginning. The Son of God appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. In other words, Jesus, you want to know what the gospel is? That's Satan's hand up there, the puppets, and Jesus wants to come and clip those little threads across, right? He wants to clip those. That's what you're enslaved by. If you don't know Jesus, you can say, I don't believe in any of this. I'm just telling you right now, that's your master, whether you want to even acknowledge God or not. And if people get super offended by that. That was Jesus' testimony, if you understand it. And he came to clip those so you could be made free and have abundant life. Real quickly, I just want to